John. George is here. And who else do we have? Lots of people with their videos off. Super. All right. Okay. Better. So we're at 12:01. I'm going to get started. And as we just said, I'm just going to ask everybody to put themselves on mute. And I want to welcome everyone to our Thursday Lunch and Learn, which for the first time we're doing as a virtual opening for our current exhibition, the Clay Studio National. The Clay Studio National is a biannual exhibition that's meant to show the depth and breadth of what's happening in the ceramic art world in the US at this moment. And we have so many voices that are that really show the variety of people working in clay, and we wanted to make sure that we showed that huge, wonderful, beautiful variety. We had Lauren Sandler as our initial juror for the show, and then we invited Kukuli Velarde and Sana Musasana to join us when we did the jurying in June. And we also appreciate that everyone was patient with us as we had a bit of a delay. We had over 400 applications of objects to the exhibition, and we just were overwhelmed by everyone's quality of the work and the enthusiasm. And so we really appreciate all of those people who applied, as well as the people who were selected and the people we invited. So thanks everyone for being here today. Thank you to the artists and the jurors. I want to always thank my colleagues here at the Clay Studio. We're working really hard. You might understand from the fact that I'm standing in the gallery that we have reopened. We are open on a very safe and a limited basis. Our hours are the same, but we have a limit of 4 people in the gallery at once. Everyone has to wear a mask at all times. I'm just an exception right now since I'm talking to you on Zoom. We do have classes that are restarting. We have open studios, and we do have a lot of online classes as well. So please check out all of our offerings. We have kids camps for the summer. So, and now it doesn't matter where you are. You can have your kids do a Clay Studio camp, even from California, Sasha. Not that you necessarily need that help with that, but we have 17 amazing staff members who've been working hard all throughout this shutdown. We've really never stopped because we immediately started trying to create virtual programming so that we could stay engaged. And I would be remiss if I didn't tell you that if you would like to make a donation to the Clay Studio, that is what helps us continue to do this free programming every week. Almost every week we've done a lunch and learn. We've had about 1,700 people join us through those for free. So we're really proud of that, but it does take a lot of work. So thanks for helping us. We are lucky to have 5 artists with us today. So we are going to have many artist talks from George Rodriguez, Sasha Reibstein, Eliza Au, Aaron Caldwell, and Kimberly Camp. And we will get to that in a second. I just have to hold on and close that. Okay. Great. Okay, so we're going to start with a tour of the gallery. Very exciting for those of you who haven't gotten to see the gallery in a long time. But we will start here in the corner. Here we go. Slow. This is the Money Chair by Yerim Lee, who's one of our resident artists who's just leaving the program. She's traveling to Archie Bray right as we speak. Leroy Johnson, who's with us today on the call. He is a resident alumni, wonderful artist here in Philly. Papoulos, picture, who lives in New York. Stephanie Cantor is one of our current residents. Oh, I think that somebody is not on mute, so I'm gonna go in and try to fix that. Okay. Alex Ferranti is another one of our resident artists right now. It's amazing how much handwork is in that guy. Kevin Snipes is joining us as a resident artist. Uh-oh, backlit. I'll go around this way. Starting in September. There's one of his great bottles. We are lucky to have Kimberly Camp with us today on the call, and here is her poodle. And now your dog joke makes more sense to me, Kimberly. It's all related. George Rodriguez also with us today. This is Brown Rat. And there's a little glimpse of an old city street for you. Uh-oh. See, I'm backlit. Sorry, guys. This is Nick Linker, Robin Hood. He's another current resident artist. He works with custom decals and slab-built ceramics. Joan Laurie, that amazing, beautiful sculpture right there. Sid Carpenter, we were so happy that she could participate. And, oops, let's see, can I do it this way? Judith Rosenthal. All right, and then just a few more down the other side. Hopefully I'm not making you seasick. Wes Brown, another of our invited artists, was a resident at the Baltimore Clayworks. Leah Kaplan, one of her beautiful translucent porcelain works. Andrea Marquis, current resident artist, works with shadows of plants and Rorschach tests. Danielle Callahan, this is called I'll Carry You. Raymond Rourke, our graphic designer extraordinaire on staff, and he's going to be speaking at a future event. Dominique Ellis, another staff member. And Nicola Kinch, who just finished her graduate work at Tyler School of Art, Floating Ruin 1. And then we have one of Koozel Velarde's amazing figurative sculptures. She also is a resident artist alumni, and this is part of our permanent collection at the Clay Studio, of which we do have one, and it will be completely on view when we move into our new building in about 14 months. So that's really exciting. And then here is, last but not least, Weights and Bobbers by Lauren Sandler. Okay, so now that we've had a tour, we are gonna go ahead and start with George Rodriguez for him to talk to us about his piece. So I'm gonna share my screen with you all. So that George can tell us about his work. Here we are. Just want to say thank you again. If anyone's interested in making a little donation, there's the link, which I can put in the chat later. Thank you so much. Our jurors really worked hard. I mean, as I said, there were 400 objects. It was no easy task. We're really grateful to them. So, George, take it away, sir.
Thanks, Jennifer. Hi, everyone. I'm really happy to, be sharing my artwork with you all. And it's really lovely to just be in the National and in the Clay Studio National and have my work shown in a different community for me for the first time. So I'm pretty much just gonna talk about rats and how those came into my work, which are fairly new to an animal that I've been looking at. So Jennifer, can you forward to actually the last one of my slides and then work backwards? Yeah, perfect, that's great. So I first started sculpting a rat when I was doing a series of Chinese zodiac vases. So these vases were based on the story of the Chinese zodiac and the great race, where all these animals race to see who would be first in line. And the rat is the first of these animals that made it through sneaking across an ox's back. So we are actually in the year of the rat currently. So when I had this idea to do these kind of vases, I started with the rat, it being the first animal. And it was just kind of this playful way of working. Okay, can we go back? Also, my partner, Marisol Rosa Shapiro, is a theater artist who works in New York and in Philadelphia. And she, for the last couple of years at this theater festival, has played Pizza Rat. So if you remember the internet meme sensation Pizza Rat, she embodied that character to be a beat poet who then kind of performed for the neighborhood around the Lower East Side. Okay, next. Can you go back? Perfect. So I moved to Philadelphia August of last year. So I was born and raised in El Paso, Texas. Went to graduate school in Seattle, Washington, where I lived for about 12 years before moving to Philly last year, August, to be the artist in residence at the Tyler School of Art. So it's been a lovely experience. I work with Lauren Sandler. I work with these amazing grad students and techs and undergrads who are all pictured in this image. So Natalie, Isaac, Scott, who I believe has been a big participant of the Clay Studio, and Anthony, were all instrumental in helping me just work my first year at the Tyler School of Art. And this is us loading a large ceramic piece into one of the kilns there. Okay, then that next image. So this kind of large rat, and in this case, this large pigeon, for me were these urban guardians. So this is a show that I will be having in Seattle in a couple of weeks. And for me, the rat was and continues to be this embodiment of people and how integral they are to this urban landscape and this urban environment that we live. And sometimes they're taken for granted and they're often dismissed, but they do kind of make up, a flavor of the city. So I wanted these, both of these animals, which the pigeon is sometimes referred to as like the rat of the sky, right? I wanted these animals to just be kind of regal and beautiful and noticed, which a lot of the time they often go unnoticed. So this is kind of the titular piece for a show that I'll be having soon in Seattle, and also one of the first large pieces that I made in Philadelphia. So I'm kind of attached to these two sculptures here. I think that's it. Thanks everyone for listening.
Thanks so much, George. And just the scale of these, even at a small size, they're really so impressive in the fact that these are both life size ish.
Yeah, these are about 61 inches tall, so 5 feet-ish.
Yeah, and to just continue that theme about pigeons and how important they've been in history as messengers, and we think of them in a very different way than they've been considered in the past, I think. And I'm sorry to say that I didn't share George's bio with you before he started. I apologize, George, so I'm going to do it now. Born and raised in the border city of El Paso, Texas, George Rodriguez creates humorous, decorative ceramic sculpture addressing his identity and community. The first in his family to finish college, he received a BFA in ceramics from the University of Texas, El Paso, then went on to receive an MFA from the University of Washington. His world curiosity grew as a recipient of a Bonderman Travel Fellowship, where he traveled the world through most of 2010. This travel continues to have a profound impact on George and is ever present in his sculpture. His work can be found in the permanent collection of the National Mexican Museum of Art in Chicago and the Hallie Ford Museum in Salem, Oregon. George is currently, as we heard, the artist in residence at the Tyler School of Art and Architecture in Philadelphia, where he was invited back for a second year, which we're excited about here in Philly. And I'm also excited to announce for the first time in public that George is having a solo show here at the Play Studio in the fall, which we're very excited about. Thank you, George. If anyone has questions, please do put them into the chat. And I will take one question for each artist right after they talk, and then any others we'll save for the end. So Nancy asks, George, one piece or multiple pieces for each sculpture? Or I guess she's asking, are they built in parts?
Yeah, good, great question, Nancy. So these pieces are built in one section, and that's because I have access to a kiln that's large enough to hold them. I have built pieces similar to this in just smaller sections, just because of necessity and having limited space. So I try and hide seams as much as possible, but these were all built in one section with interior support.
That's great. And since I can't stop talking about our new building, I will say that we are going to have larger kilns in the new space. And maybe at the end, Jen Martin can answer some questions if anyone has questions about that. Since we're going in alphabetical order, after George has to leave us early, so he went first, but we're going to ask Eliza Au to go next. And Eliza is originally from Vancouver, British Columbia in Canada. She received her BFA from the Nova Scotia College of Art and Design and her MFA from the New York State College of Ceramics at Alfred University. Artist residencies she's attended include Greenwich House Pottery in New York, the Museum of Contemporary Craft in Portland, Oregon, and the Corning Museum of Glass in Corning, New York. She has taught in Canada, the United States, and internationally at various institutions, including the Emily Carr University of Art and Design, the Alberta College of Art and Design, Monmouth College, the University of Iowa, and the Alfred Kaffa program in Beijing, China. I was currently an assistant professor of ceramics at the University of North Texas. Thank you for joining us, Eliza. And I will go to your first image. There we go. Take it away.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, it's just an honor to be in the Clay Studio National. I know it mostly just from online and virtually. I visited once, like probably 10 years ago, but I have a lot of colleagues who have been there. So I'll get into talking about my work. So I make work that's influenced by architecture and sacred space. My work actually alludes mostly to the building blocks of architecture. So the brick, the tile, and the pillar are things that I'm really interested in. And so, I'm interested in how kind of pattern, ornament, and sacred space all kind of come together. So how can this visual stimuli evoke the mindset of kind of solitude and contemplation? I think you can go to the next slide. So patterns in Islamic architecture, as well as Gothic architecture, are really influential for me. Though I don't see my work referencing a specific culture. So, the thing that I use most in my patterns is actually the arabesque or the curved line. And I make patterns that are usually made by repeating a curved line kind of linearly, or around a center, or by mirroring. So I design most of my tiles, because these works are actually constructed from flat tiles, which are slotted together. So I use Rhino CAD to design those, and then I print a model. I don't know if people are familiar with mold making, but the model is basically a positive out of PLA, which is plastic, so it's a 3D printing technique. And then I make an air compression mold from it, which is similar to kind of the ram press method. So I'm really interested in transforming two-dimensional pattern into three-dimensional forms by using a slotting method. So you can see, at IKEA, they have you can buy flat planes and slot them together to create furniture. So I'm really interested in, talking about that contemporary technique with my ceramics. I think you can go to the next slide. So these were all kind of individual tiles, which are first fired high. to this one did in China when I was working at CAFA about a year ago. And so they're far too, like, it's around cone 10. I did that in Jingdezhen in China, where you can do ceramics there. I don't know if people are familiar with that. And then I slot them, I actually glaze them with a low fire glaze and then slot them together and then fire them. So the reason why that I do this is because you can keep really straight planes and have really thin structures. So I love the fact that, architecture is usually super heavy and dense, but, I'm creating these structures that are really light and ethereal as well. So, I'm really interested in how ornament and structure basically become one and the same thing, and they're inseparable from each other, because usually ornament is just placed on the outside of something to decorate it. So I'm really interested in that kind of relationship. So like, a lot of structural things are made that way or designed that way because they're, load bearing, but they also are very beautiful structures. So I'm really drawn to ornament and pattern because it appeals to our sense of order and then also how we understand the world. I think that might be the last image, or there's one more image there, yeah. So I think that's it for me.
Great, thanks, Eliza. So I love the way you're talking about ornament and structure being integrated in a way that I think, especially since modernism in the middle of the 20th century, we have this sense that if it's functional, it can't have any ornament. And if you go back to the 19th century, they really were kind of combining, like if you look at a bridge structure that was built in 1890, the beautiful filigree work of the cast iron is part of the structure. And I feel like you're really honoring that tradition that was thought of as that you couldn't have both ornament and structure. And I just love that you're doing that.
Right. Oh, great. Thanks. Yeah, perfect.
Cool. Excellent. Anyone who knows me knows that if I can say 19th century at some point during the talk, that I'm happy. So that's good. Anyway, thank you so much, Eliza. And I'm going to see if there are any questions for you now, or maybe we'll wait till the end. Oh, somebody asks, your process. Do you sketch it first? Do you photograph along the way? Can you tell us about the scale of your pieces, largest and smallest? So that's a lot of questions, but maybe scale and whether you sketch. I think maybe the person means by hand, I guess.
Yeah, I do everything digitally. So basically I have a digital sketchbook of, all my files, and I work with Rhino. That's like a CAD software program. I use actually several programs, so that's the one that I use the most. So there is no actually hand drawing. And the reason for that is that because it's really accurate. Like I've tried drawing before, and it's like not my greatest skill. And it is really that you need quite a lot of accuracy, or enough accuracy for things to kind of fit together. The size of the pieces, so this one I think is about 9 inches square. So they're not enormous. I would like to work on a bigger scale, but it's like if I make something larger, it's still like smaller units that are basically put together, because obviously you can't make something that thin and that big. What is the largest and smallest piece? Oh, sorry, I'm going too many questions, but yeah, so I think the biggest piece that I've made is probably 36 inches square, but made out of multiple units.
Got it. That's great. Okay, thank you. And again, if anyone has further questions for each artist, please do just put them right into the chat. So we are going to ask Aaron Caldwell to speak next. Aaron was born in 1996 and raised in Fresno, California. He graduated from Southern Illinois University, Carbondale with a BA in General Studio Art in 2019, and is currently in the MS in Art Education program at Illinois State University. Aaron has spent the past 3 years honing his skill and interest in ceramics after discovering ceramics his junior year of college. He has shown work in the San Angelo Museum Ceramic National and Seeka Student Show, and has been published in Studio Potter, and has received the Warren McKenzie Advancement Award from Northern Clay Center. He's also passionate about education and believes schools and communities that serve BIPOC need access and opportunities for art making and engaging experiences, and plans on helping sustain and create art opportunities for BIPOC communities and individuals. Thank you so much for being with us, Aaron.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
All right, so this is my piece, Sun-Kissed Vessel. And the way that I approach my work is I noticed that I enjoyed a lot of social works that already were addressing Black folks' culture and relationship with our hair. And I wanted to add to that conversation to not only talk about the care for our hair, but also the care for our body. And what I mean by that is our relationship with lotion and moisturizing products. And growing up hearing, you don't want to eat ashy, you don't want your skin to look dry and flaky and white. So you like put on lotion. So this relationship that we had to people with fair skin who may not need to really worry about that. So this is just a small collection of what I have. I would say this is on the low end of what my mom does, like maybe 20 times as much as this. But this is what I have. I have petroleum jelly, I have Vaseline, coconut oil, and my pink brush. So this is kind of like the inspiration for my work, and so I use different properties of these moisturizing products to come up with the different glazes for my pieces. And so we go to the next slide. So this is what I typically make. I usually make zoomorphic forms that are like vessels, and oh, I was trying to speak louder, maybe too quiet. But I usually make zoomorphic forms, and I ornament the vessel with what I call the lotion glaze. So this one was petroleum jelly on a sheet. And then I also add the comb as a tail for the piece. But I wanted to do more with the lotion glaze. I didn't want it to just always be a way to ornament the vessel. I wanted to tell a narrative as well. And so if we go to the next slide. So I find it very important that I source. I find that, can you hear me now?
It's okay. I think, Aaron, that your connection just is a little spotty. So
Okay.
just do the best you can. Don't worry about it.
Okay.
We can generally understand what you're saying.
All right. So I think it's very important for me to source Black women artists in my work, just because growing up, Black women have always been a prominent inspiration and influence in my life. Like my mom, my grandmother, my aunt, also my older sister. Like these people were the main support system in my life, and so I want to continue looking towards Black women as the key inspiration for my artistic practice. So this is Alma Thomas. This is one of my favorite paintings by her. It's called Starry Night and the Astronauts. And so I really enjoyed the repetitive shape, the pattern, the color, the composition, like all of these things. I really wanted to find a way to utilize that in my own work. And so if we actually go way back to the first slide with the actual piece. And so I wanted to utilize that and find a way to make use of the lotion glaze in that same manner. And so I have these varied but repetitive brush strokes with the lotion glaze. And then I also have these, there's a half circle on one side, and then there's a full circle on the other side that represent the sun. And then I have the lotion glaze kind of following a pattern around the vessel. And so that's where that idea of creating a narrative with the lotion glaze. So it's not only ornamenting the vessel, but also telling a narrative. And so like that narrative also comes from this quote that I always heard growing up all the time. The sun love I can, because sorry, I'm messing that up. Yeah, so the sun loves our skin because we have melanin in our skin. And so I always heard that all the time growing up as a kid, as a way to love our skin, to make sure it's moisturized and healthy. And so I wanted to make a piece that nodded to that quote as well. And so yeah, that's this specific piece in this show.
Thank you so much, Aaron. I love that you ended with that quote, and also that you included the Alma Thomas painting that you were inspired by. With that tying together so many different layers, the repetition of her work, I can see it now that you've shown us that with yours, even though your work is so different. And just, you know, this moment that we're all going through, and the idea that this whole thing really embodies self-care and self-love in a really strong way it's quite moving. So thank you for sharing with us. Okay, let's go to a question. I think we'll stick with technical questions for this, and then we'll do more general ones at the end. So I'm intrigued by the lotion glaze. What challenges did you have with using lotion as glaze? I think maybe you were just trying to make it look like lotion. Is that right?
Yeah, so yeah, it's a common misconception. I always have people ask me if that's actually lotion. It's not. It's just a gloop glaze that I use, and I add colorant to represent the various different hues of lotion. And so I have like cocoa butter and then just like a white lotion. I'm working on a pink one for a pink product that a lot of my kids had growing up. Terrible product, but we all had it as a kid. And so I'm trying to make various colors for this glaze that are deeply connected with the actual colors of the real life moisturizing products.
Yeah, that's great. Cool, thank you. Okay, so we'll go back to any more questions for Aaron at the end. Thank you so much. And next up we have Kimberly Camp. So Kimberly Camp's paintings and dolls have appeared in over 100 solo and group exhibitions, including the American Craft Museum, Smithsonian's Renwick Gallery, International Sculpture Center, University of Michigan, and Manchester Craftsmen's Guild. The 3-year traveling exhibition, Uncommon Beauty and Common Objects, where her work was featured on the cover of the exhibition catalog. Camp's workshops and residencies include the Baltimore Museum of Art, Virginia Museum of Fine Arts, and the Renwick Gallery. Her work is in the private and museum collections, including Faith Ringgold, Judith Jameson, Betty Carter, Manchester Craftsmen's Guild, and the J.B. Speed Art Museum. She's been featured in Essence, Nouvelle Objet, Fiber Arts, National Geographic World, The Village Voice, and the Smithsonian. In February, Camp received the 2020 Award of Excellence Art Makes Us Human Award from the American Craft Council. And I think that Kimberly's resume is probably 2 more pages long, but because she's has quite an impressive roster of activities. But I'll let you start talking about your work for now. Thank you, Kimberly.
Thank you, Jennifer, and thank you everybody for tuning in. This is pretty exciting. I couldn't be more patient, as you can see from my work. I use a lot of different materials. I often say that part of that is my curiosity on how materials work together. The other part of it is I enjoy the whimsical nature of combining things that people wouldn't ordinarily expect to find combined. And you can absolutely see that I have a real love for animals. So I often do anthropomorphic figures. I use polymer clays as well as air-dried clays. All of the bodies for my dolls can be anything from clay to leather to fabric, painted canvas. And I often use beads in my work. I've collected beads over the years in my travels from all over the world, and fascinated by the notion that they are one of the most essential components of adornment on just about every continent again. So the poodle was done with sheepskin. I actually found at a shop in Philadelphia down in Taylor's Row, which still exists. The tail is cotton fiber. The body is sewn fabric. And then the head on this particular piece is paper clay that has been primed with gesso. I very seldom use glazes on my work because I prefer to be able to control the surface texture a lot more inside where the body and the rest of the doll are going to go. So using glaze in advance really ties me into certain ideas, certain colors, etc. So I often use clay that's been twice fired, or air-dried clays that have been cured and then sealed, and then figure out how the piece actually comes together. We can go to the next image. Conceiving a couple of years ago, I was really disturbed, and still am, by the anti-immigrant stance that this country has been showing. Right now, about 25% of the continent of Africa is banned from coming to the United States. And it is the mingling of textures, colors, shapes, forms, and patterns that give our nation, we have. So I decided to do an immigration series that focused on those very colors, patterns, and textures, particularly of countries that are banned from coming to the US. This piece is porcelain. Again, it is not glazed. It is instead twice fired, and then, now this actually doesn't have any more finish on it other than that. The fabric is mud cloth that comes from Mali, and then the beads are glass beads. These pieces, I also have others that are about 32 inches high. And each one of them, because the bodies are sewn separately, are sculpted in such a way that again gives them their stance, their attitude, their form, their behavior once they sort of come to be. Usually I'll do a bunch of heads, feet, arms, hands. And when I set down to do a series of dolls, I'll sort of pick which head wants to go first. The table is sort of the spirit of the table. In many ways, it ushers in the rest of the pieces, because a lot of times I'll work one piece here, one tail there, wrapping another material here. If I pull something out of my fabric collection, I might use it to work on several pieces at a time. But it's always that first figure that ends up being finished from start to finish. You can go to the next image. This is one of the pieces that I like to say is really a sense of humor. This piece is called Fly. It is a combination of different clay bodies as well as burlap. There's leather, there is wire, there is jute, there is suede. There are all kinds of different materials coming together. This piece is about 31 inches high, 36 inches high rather. With his long, skinny legs, he has an armature below that helps him to stand. All of the rest of it is all hands. And this actually is in a collection with one woman in New Jersey that purchased this piece. And yes, he does have green eyes. I think it's important sometimes for artists to not take themselves as seriously as they do, because in many ways, what we do is a form of communication. And it's as important for everybody to sometimes step back and just have a little fun, a little bit of laughter. You know, a good joke will always levitate people. And so I always try to make that work in some joy. Can we go to the next piece, please? That was it. So those are the, I guess you go back. So those are some of my works. And I was honored and surprised the American Craft Council show this past February that I received one of 5 awards of excellence for my work. Going into a booth, it makes me look a little schizophrenic, but I have to own that. Because sometimes very serious, sometimes not. Pieces can range from 6 inches to 6 feet. It really does depend on what it is I feel like doing at that time. So thank you all so much. If there's any questions, I'm happy to take them now.
Great. Thank you, Kimberly. I am not surprised at all that you got that award, but we're just really happy to have you in the show with the Clay Studio. And I will look for a question. Let's see. Boy, I'm just really drawn to Rosanna's questions. Did you model Adua after an actual person you met during your travels? And how long does it take you to complete one of these?
Ooh, so I model my dolls based on people that I see all the time. And sometimes people will come. I have a small gallery in Collingswood. I moved here retiring from the New York. It's very common for me to make a doll that looks like somebody that walked into my gallery or someone who's a friend. I'm just intrigued by how people's faces are put together and some of the looks that they have in their eyes and their smiles. So it's very common that, and I actually have one customer who walked in and I said, I'm going to make a doll that looks like you. And I actually did, and it blew her away. But so that's what I really use. When it comes to the time, it's really hard to judge. The piece that I was a piece that was created over the course of about 2.5 days. I have a pangolin that I made that is air-dried clay, polymer clay, it's canvas, it's cork, it's onyx. It has all kinds of amazing things. It took me about 6 weeks to do because I used cork to create the scales on the pangolin so that it did in fact look as though it approximated some of the pattern of the animal. So it really does depend. I tend to work fast, but as I mentioned before, I also work on multiple pieces at a time. So some of them will come into being very quickly and others not so much.
Thank you. That's a great explanation. I'm imagining a pangolin made out of cork, and my first thought was all of those wine corks that I have from the past 4 months. Maybe I should do that. Okay. But we'll go with Kimberly's humor as our leader. We are, thanks again for that. We're gonna move on to Sasha now. Sasha Reibstein is a mixed media artist living and working in San Diego, California. Her work explores transformation, mortality, and the sublime through a merging of abstraction and representation. I guess I should go to her dense and mysterious surfaces reflect an obsessive attention to detail and an interest in evoking curiosity and wonder. Born in Boston, Massachusetts, Reibstein received an MFA from Massachusetts College of Art and a BFA from the University of Michigan. She relocated to San Diego in 2006 and is currently a professor of art and head of the ceramics program at Palomar College in San Marcos, California. Reibstein has traveled extensively, working and exhibiting in China, Denmark, Hungary, and Germany. During these residencies abroad and working in her home studio, she has created sculptural works and installations that have been featured in over 70 national and international exhibitions, including a solo exhibition in Berlin entitled New World. And she was also a visiting artist here at the Clay Studio. Sasha, take it away.
Yes, hi. Thank you, Jen. So this is my piece, Walking on the Beaches, Looking at the Peaches. This is part of a series that I've been working on for the past 2 years. It is a couple elements I want to draw your attention to. One is this drip formation. That's been something I've been doing for about a decade now, a little bit over that. And I love that it can morph into, excuse me, so many different things. It started as this idea of collapse and release, and it's really transformed into this metamorphosis or growth or awakening. I love that it can do all those things and that the fluidity allows it to really feel alive. Also in this piece is an element of landscape, an abstracted element or surrealist element of landscape. So you can see the layering of leaves, and then there are these like tentacles or tendrils that are hanging down. They've got gold leaf on them, and the little orange balls are actually flocked, so those are fuzzy. And landscape's something that I've used in my work for a long time as a way to evoke the feeling of the sublime. But because of that, in recent years, I've been invited to be in a lot of shows about the environment, and most recently, specifically about the California ecosystem. And in doing that, it's made me really think about what California is to me. So as you mentioned, I was born in Boston. I was actually raised in Philly. And so I was raised with this idea of what California is. I think it's one of the few places that is actually more of a idea than a reality. I'm sure you guys have this idea of what it is. And so I think about the California dream, and for me, that's really this land of endless possibilities, golden beaches, tanned bodies, Hollywood fame, like just everything is possible in California. And so I've really been thinking about that a lot. If we can jump to the next slide. This piece is currently up at the San Diego International Airport. And I'm showing this because this was really a transition point for me that led me to the piece in the show. So this is a show called Forces of Nature.
Yeah.
What? Is there a problem? Okay. What?
Alex,
yeah. They were asking us specifically to respond to the San Diego landscape. And so I have 3 of these vitrines. They're huge. They're about 40 inches by 40 inches. And I wanted to create these like snow globe landscapes. And so in each one, I focused on a different part of the San Diego landscape. And this one is the ocean. And the ocean to me is terrifying. I'm one of those people that I really want to be around water, on water, but I absolutely do not want to be in it. It gives me like an existential crisis to go in deep ocean waters. And I wanted to capture that, something that was really beautiful and had a little bit of terrifying nature to it. So to me, this is the sea monster that's kind of rising out of the depths. And I've got these little like spider, crab, seaweed pile creatures that are actually floating on this bed. The cool thing about this vitrine is there's about 6 inches of glitter in there. So they're kind of emerging out from the depth. And if we can jump to the next slide now. So this piece is actually same piece. So these are 2 different views of the same piece. And this is in that last installation. So I've been doing that a lot, as well as creating these discrete sculptures that can kind of step in and out of these environments I'm creating. And I think of all of these pieces as creatures. So I'm kind of creating this alternate universe, thinking about, again, this California as a utopia and wanting to, which is also an illusion, right? And thinking about that as a surrogate for the American dream as well. And we're all very familiar with this idea of American exceptionalism and how that is truly an illusion. So I'm kind of thinking of this as a parallel place where all of that glitter and glamorousness is actually true. And so this is the sea monster rising from the depth. On the side, you can see it's almost like a wave hanging over. I picture myself like 1 inch tall from the tsunami. And if you look at it, you can see the layering of leaves, these little tentacle tendril elements that are hanging down. And the one distinction in this piece is on the back there, those are actual crystals that I cultivated onto the sculpture. That's the true color of the crystal, the natural color is that blue. And that again amplifies this feeling of mysticism in the work. So take a look at that and actually scroll back to the first slide, Jen, of the piece in the show. So if you looked at these pieces unglazed, they actually look almost exactly the same. They have the same components and language. But for that piece, I was really talking about this underwater mysterious depth. And this is once we go above ground, right? So we're on the golden beaches. We're looking at those tanned, oiled up bodies. Walking on the beaches, looking at the peaches is actually a song lyric from a British punk rock band from back in the 70s. And it was a song, just like a lighthearted song about that, about California, about walking on the beaches. And I actually, all of the pieces in the airport show at least have titles that are songs about California. And so, because that's a thing, right? There's a whole genre of things about this idea of California. So yes, in this last piece, let's jump to that last piece there, Jen, since you're there. This is another of that transition point. So this is a piece that was inspired by, in 2019, there was a super bloom in Southern California that was so brilliant it could be seen from space. And I have a 7-year-old that talks about space all day, every day, literally for years now. We talk about it. So again, it's this way for me to like step back outside of myself. I think a lot of people find the great beyond terrifying, but for me, it's very comforting to think of myself as small and meaningless. It allows our problems to also be much smaller and step into an awareness of this like much larger universe that exists. And one other fun note about this is I made this piece based on the idea. And then for a slide presentation, sorry, I live near the police station, so you're probably hearing that siren. I looked up this source image later and I was amazed at that color. So you can see that color play back to that walking on the beaches, looking at the peaches. So that's the little history of that piece. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Sasha. So were you just saying that you did this piece from memory of that image and then went back and saw how close you got to the color?
Yeah, I really was like just thinking about this like idea of the color and what I saw like driving down the highway and seeing this super bloom, and I just started.
Oh, so you saw it in real life. It wasn't
Yeah,
just
living here. It didn't look quite those colors, but that chartreuse, the orange is luck, but that chartreuse is what I was really focusing on.
wow, that's amazing. And yeah, I love the kind of what in film is called pull focus, that idea that you, for one moment, you're so close to something that you're looking at a huge version of whatever it is, and like your perspective of how small you are based on like this giant aerial, this space photograph, and just thinking about space and your smallness within the universe, I think allows for that constant shift between macro and micro understanding of, like you're saying, emotions, our problems, the world in general. Like we have to focus on it, it's up close to us, but in order to get through life, really, you have to kind of take a step back.
Especially right now.
Spoken as to mommies, maybe, of young children at this moment as well. Okay, that was amazing. Thank you so much. I'm gonna look at our chat to see what question we have for you. Back a little. Everyone's just saying glitter and I love your work. Oh, how about, is Ken Price an influential artist to you?
Definitely, like in terms of this like weird amorphous creatures that's moving. Like I love his soft folds. I also just like love this really round form. So thinking about some of his works, not all of his works, but some of his works definitely are an inspiration for sure.
Okay, great, thank you. I am going to stop our share and go back to gallery because I like to see everyone's smiling faces. And I will just remind everyone that if you have any more questions, including about the building, because I think Jen Martin's on the call and I can try to answer some as well. Thinking about that, if you asked a question earlier that I skipped over, feel free to put it in again. Sandrine, oh, I bet George is gone. Is George still here? Yeah. Nope, he had to go to his class. Okay. Somebody was asking about how he ships his work, which is, one of those questions I feel like that artists and gallery people get asked a lot. It's, each piece is different. One new message. So Rosanna again asked about each of you and your thoughts about how you're making art in this moment. We talked a little bit yesterday. Aaron mentioned something about his creativity in this time when he hasn't had access to the studio, but I think you're about to get some, right, Aaron?
Yeah. So I haven't really touched clay for the past 3.5 months, just because I haven't had access to a kiln. But I'm getting one next week, and because of that, this whole week I've actually been making quite a lot of work. But prior to this week, I ended up just picking up on paper making as something to just keep my hands busy, a new skill to have. And it's still, I haven't really decided what I'm doing with the paper, but I have been including my hair inside of the paper. And so I'm exploring paper in the same way that I'm exploring my work in clay.
Kimberly, did you also mentioned something about just maybe this is giving you more time?
Yeah, I loved, actually, I'm really enjoying the quarantine time because the space of being able to know that you will have no interruptions or distractions has been absolutely wonderful. And for an introvert, it's like hog heaven. So the other thing that it was interesting, when I came back from the craft show, people were just starting to talk about COVID. Within 2 weeks of my return, the convention center was a field hospital. I can balance the fabrics and beads and elastic and clay. And so I started making masks. It seemed to make sense that I should have some. And I actually, through the whole period, sold enough masks to, make a mortgage payment for the gallery. So, it speaks a lot to the need for artists to be flexible and just sort of take advantage of each moment to create. Now that I have things that sort of partially opened back up, I'm really tied to the play, but also painting. And again, having the freedom to be able to just let out the energy that has happened in this moment between the pandemic, Black Lives Matter, protests, secret police, et cetera, et cetera. It's doing interesting things to what artists say about their work. And as I often tell people, when this is all over, and at some point it will be, it's the artists that are going to remind us about our fears, our hopes, what we wanted it to be about, what it really was all about. And so, although it's a time when it seems like art is always on the back burner because there's so many other issues, people are relying on the artistic community to be those people that chronicle the moment. And so I think it's important for each one of us to really, periodically take some of that stuff in deep and then exhale it out.
That is a great way to describe it, and that breathing it in, and it's going to take a lot of inhales and exhales to get us to the sort of the next level of where we need to be. Thank you. I saw Eliza and Sasha nodding. Do either of you want to speak to, maybe what Kimberly said or the idea of making during isolation?
I think it's been really great. I mean, I've been lucky to have a kiln at home, but a lot of my process is digital, or it's like making molds and things like that. So I'm lucky enough that I have a space in my home I can do that. I also thrive from having uninterrupted time. Just like long stretches of it. And it was, particularly productive because, if I'm at school, there's usually so many small interruptions that happen all the time. So it's just been a really focused period. And it's isolating, but I think sometimes in isolation, it is can be a very productive and kind of insightful period to be working.
Yeah, thanks, Eliza. And Sasha, not to make you be the, I think it's important to talk about, parenting and being in this other way of, living at this moment, but you don't have to talk about that if you don't want to.
It's kind of hard not to when we're talking about working. I mean, I feel incredibly lucky. I have a big, my home studio is fairly large. I have 3 kilns. I have a lot of space. So I can kind of keep working in theory. I have a 3-year-old and a 7-year-old. So that's where the in theory part comes. This remote learning, you have to be a first grade teacher all of a sudden. And my 3-year-old needs 24 hours a day home care. And unlike what Kimberly said, in California, we're shutting back down. Our family's high risk. So we basically haven't left the house since March. But I have found I need that time. And I found a way to at least spend some of my time in the studio. I really needed that. And I feel very lucky to have the access to things so I can keep working. So that's definitely part of it. And Jen, if you don't mind, I would like to answer the question that popped up about travelers interacting with my work. Because I have gotten to see that. Like I get so many great messages on Instagram when I was actually installing the piece, pouring like 50 plus pounds of glitter into a vitrine. Like I had a huge crowd around me. People were recording. One of the prompts for the show is they really wanted it to be positive. So that was something I really had to think about. They wanted people to have this feeling of they just arrived in San Diego, right? And I live here. And so it's this paradise that we're welcoming you to. Oh, one thing I forgot to mention in the talk, in California, a huge portion of the beaches have actual pyrite in the sand. And so you like walk along the water and you see gold, like literally going in between your toes, which is this amazing feeling. And so that was a lot of what I was thinking, was capturing that. And I get a lot of messages. Kids love my works of this just brilliance and this wonder and magicalness. And so I really enjoy being able to provide that brief moment.
Yeah, that's great. And I was just, and Maine, and the mica is everywhere in Maine, or like I think it's, yeah, and so it's silver, but it's like the water is sparkly, everything's sparkly. It's amazing.
Amazing.
So I'm going to take one more question, and then we can sort of thank again and wrap up. To our presenters of color, what specific experiences do you want to highlight within the ceramic world that you feel are particularly relevant right now, or that you think need more attention? If anyone would like to take that question, if not, that's fine too.
Oh, I just wrote into the chat there, but yeah, I lived in China for the past 2 years before I came here. That was the only time like I've ever been to China. I'm Chinese Canadian actually. And you know, I think like when people think of like Chinese ceramics, or like, you know, Asian people making ceramics in general, there's a tendency to lump everybody into one boat. And just being there, it's been phenomenal to see, you know, just within China, how many different type of cultures there are in terms of food or ceramics. And there's also like a lot of people like me, like kind of a younger generation, who have basically been born and lived abroad. So, you know, I think it's extremely difficult to, you know, to put people into certain categories when they really do overlap and have completely different cultural experiences.
I mean, I would say that it's more about now what is happening about the acknowledgement of the monocultural nature of how we look at tradition and what is acceptable tradition and what is being made and who it's being made by really needs to be challenged. I mentioned to some folks that when I did the American Craft Council show, it's very interesting. 1 in 5 people would walk in my booth and ask me if I made the work. At first I thought people were joking, and I said, oh yeah, you know, there's this thing like where you make stuff and you send it in, and then if you get to come, you get to sit with the stuff you made. And I finally started asking people why they were asking me, and one woman said, but they're so complex. And I said, okay, but somebody asked us, she said, well, you could be the assistant. I said, then my badge would say assistant. I have, I'd say easily open that people come in and look at my dolls and ask if they're voodoo dolls. So there is a lot that needs to happen in terms of educating a broader public about art making and who makes art and what the traditions are, and acknowledging that one particular bent that has been overemphasized in the art world, regardless of medium, so that it acknowledges that there is, you know, I love quoting, you know, Dewey when Barnes opened. We show that everybody's capable of making great beauty. How can one man look at another as inferior? And so it's a time, I think, I hope, where people are at least more open to understanding that there are 1,000 ways to do any one thing. And there are millions of artists on the planet, and probably half of them are absolutely outstanding of what that excellence looks like, and who that excellence means, who does that excellence. I think that's a really important component. Because sometimes, you know, at this age, as Toni Morrison said, all of this stuff is really fatiguing. So, but you keep on going, you know. But just for the record, I don't make voodoo dolls. I'm not Haitian, so.
Thanks, Kimberly. That's just moving and important thing to keep talking about. Anybody else want to comment on that?
Yeah. I think that I've kind of shifted from, so I originally wanted to be a contributor and highlighting specific experiences and issues to the ceramic community. And that's like a lot of what my undergraduate work was about. But I think that I've now shifted more towards making my focus more about just making work for Black individuals to feel joy and recognized, and just contribute to that realm of just having more options to see work that kind of highlights us and brings us joy, have relatable content to look at. And I think the benefit, I guess, for my work is that people who do not have that relationship with moisturizing products, for example, come in and learn something new. So it still does that. It still does the job of highlighting and educating people, but that's not the focus of my work. The focus of my work is definitely geared towards giving Black audiences more representation, or more artwork, ceramic artwork specifically, to look at and feel seen. And it's not so much about the artist's identity, being Black is a very political category. It's more about just being able to feel seen and recognized for once, and not have to think about the political implications of being Black.
Yeah, it's who you're making the work for.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's a beautiful thing. Thanks to all of you. I just want to, anybody else? I think we are good. This was such an amazing talk. I'm just really grateful to the 4 and the 5, including George, artists who joined us today. Taking the time to talk to us about your work brings so much more meaning and connection between you and the other artists in the show and our community of appreciators. And all of you appreciators out there are really important to this as well. We couldn't have a gallery if we didn't have people who really felt the need in their soul to come and look at art and use that as a way to connect with the rest of humanity. And I truly believe that that's what art has the power to do, whether you're a maker or an appreciator, or somebody who's just learning, or someone who's been doing it for 50 years. So thanks to all of you. I want to make sure that I say to Leroy, who's waving at us, please join us next week. We're going to highlight Leroy Johnson, amazing artist, former resident here at the Clay Studio. His work is in the show, he's not earlier.
Now I have something to say next week.
You'll have something to say next week? I have no doubt that you have something to say.
It's very enlightening and interesting. Kimberly.
Hi, Leroy.
Yes, how you doing? Good to see you.
And we'll have several other artists, and hopefully the final week of presentations we'll be inviting our jurors back to talk to us as well about what they were thinking. I know some of you asked about the jurors, and tune in on August 13th. That'll be right before the show closes, to listen to their thoughts, I hope. And yeah, everybody, thanks again. Have a great day. Share your art and moments of joy as you move on, and have thanks again for joining us.
Thank you.
Bye. Signing off. I like to watch everyone as they wave and say goodbye.
Thank you. Thank you.
My moment of joy. We had 72 people on the call today.
Thank you.
Bye. Jim, I love that painting behind you. Oh, he's gone.
Thank you, Jennifer.
Thank you, Ellen. Have a nice day.
You too.
Thanks.
Okay.
Now you're unmuted.
I'm going to be off.